this is going to be just so valuable for everybody listening.
Don't start with debate, start with dialogue. Let's put the conversation on the table and let's talk about what is it that we know, what is it that we're challenged by.
If we had a mic, we would just drop it and walk out the door. I don't know where you came from or how you came into my life, but I can tell you with the utmost amount of certainty, we're not done with each other for a long time. So we're here live at the Northeast Lean Conference. I just finished a keynote this morning, and this guy, Scott, who looks a lot like that guy, walks up to me and he starts talking and he starts telling me about the pillars of lean. And I'm like, yeah, I know the pillars of lean. And the conversation just went in a different direction because we know the pillars of lean are continuous improvement and respect for people. And generally speaking, the whole world goes, those are the two pillars. Cool. Let's talk about continuous improvement and all of the tools and wonderful things surrounding all of the continuous improvement, but not you. You went the other way and you started telling me about a system that, correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere along here. I'm not even going to attempt it. I'm going to let you do that. But basically, you went the other way and said, there's enough stuff in the public domain about continuous improvement, but I can't find anything about respect for people.
Right.
And then you talked to me for 30 minutes. My jaw is hanging open the whole time, and I didn't put two and two together until the end of our conversation. And I was like, Scott, this is a podcast, and we're doing it today. So thank you for dropping what you had on the go to join us. I got this smile I can't get rid of right now because I know this is going to be just so valuable for everybody listening. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem. And tell us a little bit about your story. I mean, you just have to say everything all over again now.
Yeah, I know. I have to do it again. Hopefully I remember everything. So Scott Govin, I've been a lean consultant for more than 25 years. The first, probably 2/3 of my career focused on the traditional things that we normally focus on, continuous improvement, the tools, getting standard work, doing kaizens, all of that work. And then was challenged one day to say, okay, well, hey, the client we got to do this respect for people thing. I said, that we're doing respect for people. We're making it a better environment. We're being nice to people. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, is that it? Is it just about being nice? That can't be it. And so I went on a journey to find. I said, someone's written about this, of course. Someone's probably figured out the tools around it. Someone's got a model out there. Looked for a long time. And so couldn't find anything. So little by little, I started developing, little tools or little assets that I could bring into the practice. And then a few years back, I decided, no, I gotta really double down on this. And so I started looking. I couldn't find much. There's stuff written about respect for people. It's so high level. It's so theoretical. I couldn't bring that into a practice. I couldn't bring that to a client and say, oh, here's how you practice respect for people. Here's the system that you put in place in order to be able to say that, yes, we're practicing respect for people, like we're practicing continuous improvement.
Well, continuous improvement, lots of charts, lots of graphs, lots of making sure you're on the right path.
There's thousands of books that tell you here's how to do it. And I was looking for the how-to with respect for people, and I couldn't find it. So I started digging in, and I started looking, and lo and behold, it turns out that there isn't much out there. And a little bit on purpose, I think Toyota, kept that close to the vest. They knew that was their competitive advantage, and so and I've read and found articles where Taichung even said, hey, listen, we we kind of kept that close to the vest because we knew that that was our competitive advantage. We didn't want to give up our competitive advantage. So, okay, makes sense. So then I went on this journey and I said, I'm going to just talk to as many people as will talk to me about it. And as I started talking to, probably north of 100 people at this point that have worked for Toyota or that currently work for Toyota, and I would just ask them about, well, how do you engage with people? What are the things that you do? There were three things that started to emerge out of that. And one was that they just see behavior more objectively. We tend to see the behavior and judge it. Well, that guy's lazy. Okay, well, okay. But they look and say, okay, well, why is that person, the 5 whys, why is that person behaving that way? Why are they not filling out the chart? Why did they not follow the standard work? But they look at it more objectively to try to understand, and they're really seeking to understand more what is going on there. What is it about the process that enabled them to not follow it,
Right.
as opposed to judging, well, that guy just doesn't care, or he's lazy, or, well, that's just who that guy is. And so they're very good about not judging it, but looking at the behaviors more objectively. So that was the first thing it was a theme that I kept hearing. I said, okay. So the second thing was that they really valued the individual contributions and experiences of people. Mm-hmm. So not just what maybe their education was or what their role was. Oh, he's an engineer, so we value your engineering skills. They valued the whole person. They really valued the whole experience that the person could bring to the conversation. And I kept hearing this over and over. And I said, okay, that's different than, because we tend to value the title or the role or the capability that person has, and we kind of lean into that. Invite that guy because he knows about X, right? As opposed to, well, invite that guy because he's got a lot of travel experience and I bet he's seen a lot of things. And so that was something different. And then the third thing that I noticed is that they really systematically kind of work at bringing together that collective wisdom of people. We say, oh, well, we want to have a diverse group of people talk about this problem. Well, that diverse group isn't actually that diverse, turns out, in most cases. But they're really good about really bringing different voices into the conversation and really tapping into that collective wisdom.
Ben, and I've been doing this for 20 years too. And as you're talking, I'm like, I'm guilty. I literally just launched one of our biggest kaizen events, and I put the CNC people in charge of the CNC area, the assembly people in charge of the assembly area. I know better. I'm publicly hanging myself right now. but wow, that's so valuable. We've got, you're talking about the three.
Yeah, so we basically came to these 3 insights. And so I took those 3 insights and I said, okay, well, how do I operationalize those 3 insights? And so seeing behaviors more objectively essentially became engage with compassion. And so behind each of the insights, which became those principles, we've got 3 behaviors as well. So engage with compassion is the first principle. And the first behavior is to check your perspective. And so am I judging this person? Am I judging what I'm observing? Am I judging the behavior that I've seen, or am I judging even the circumstance that I have? Right. So check myself to not judge, right? And so that's the first behavior. The second one is, okay, now that I've checked myself and I'm like, okay, well, I thought the guys were like, well, is he actually lazy? Or could it be something else? Well, now I got to seek to understand. So that's the second behavior. So trying to understand, okay, help me understand why you did that or why you didn't do that. And really trying to get to understand, oh, okay, now that I understand, the third behavior is then act as support. And this is a tricky one because we often want to support people in the way I want to support you. Like, oh, I see the problem. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. And I'm not checking in with the other person. Like, okay, we say in this program, we say, there's 3 ways you can act as support. I can help you think through the problem, or I can just listen first. I can help you think through the problem, or I can help you fix the problem. And so my inclination might be to fix the problem, but all you want me to do is help think through the problem, because you actually want to fix the problem.
Right. That's exciting.
It's exciting, right?
Yeah.
And so the problem is, though, that we don't check in with the other person. So my job in acting to support is first, know what I'm willing to do. I'm only willing to listen. Okay, you want me to do. Well, we got to disconnect. So I got to fix that first. I got to get us aligned first. But then once we're aligned, oh, you just want me to help you think through the problem. Okay, well, let me back up to help you think through the problem. Okay, so now I'm actually supporting you. And I'm doing it in your interest, not in my interest. So that's the first principle. The second principle.
The first principle. Like, we're done. I mean, like, I'm just like, yes. How do I document all of this? This is so good. Okay, sorry. I'll stop interrupting you.
No worries. No. So the second principle that we came to, so what we saw was that they really valued the experience of others. And so as we thought through that, we said, okay, well, what does that really translate to? Well, it translates to treating people like they matter. We all want to feel heard. We all want to feel valued. We all want to feel like we're contributing. And when that happens, we feel like we matter. And so the second principle was treat people like they matter. And so when we thought through, okay, well, how do we operationalize that? What are the behaviors that line up to that? The first one was, well, we should prioritize well-being. Not only my own well-being, but your well-being as well. So if I see that something's going on with you, I can say, well, hold on. I know that that's not in your best interest, and that's not in your best well-being. But also advocating for myself. Like, hey, listen, Mondays, this is what's important to me. I got to do this on Mondays. And so, but prioritizing our own well-being. So that was the first one. The second one was valuing individuality. And this is where often people in the program, they kind of go, oh, wow, okay, yeah, that one I'm messing up on. Because valuing individuality, really what it came down to was not objectifying people, not putting people in boxes. And we do that often. Well, those millennials, you know how they are.
Right.
These old guys, they won't change. And that's where we do that without thinking about it. But when we do that, we then can't connect and appreciate what that other person really can bring to the situation. We can't appreciate their experience. We can't appreciate their point of view. We can't appreciate the value that they could maybe bring to the conversation. So the second one was, how do we really get better at valuing individuality? How do we get better at valuing each other? And then the third behavior that we wanted to teach was appreciating people. We often have these recognition programs. I'm going to give you a gift card. Thanks for that. And those are kind of throwaway appreciations. And we wanted it to be more meaningful. The more meaningful appreciations are when you recognize me, not what I did, not the performative recognition, but you recognize me as a person. You recognize something about me, who I am as an individual. And so what we started to lean into was, it's really about showing gratitude and appreciation for people. And so when you spotlight someone, you're not just saying, hey, thanks for doing that, but thanks for doing that because you are the kind of person, you have that kind of commitment, you have that kind of tenacity, you have that kind of thought process that is really valuable to us, and really appreciating those characteristics about people. And I'll tell you, it takes a little bit of practice to do, but when you kind of can get into the habit of doing that, it's such a much more meaningful practice to do. So that's treat people like they matter. And the third one was where we saw them, really tapping into that collective wisdom and really bringing that collective wisdom to solve problems. And so, we thought about that and we said, okay, so what does that really mean? Well, what it translated to was we want to partner for mutual benefit. So that's our third principle. Well, so how do you partner for mutual benefit? Well, the first one is you got to show your cards. Like you got to kind of put it out there. Hey, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm good at. Here's maybe what I'm not so good at. Here's where I kind of screw up sometimes.
And this is like in North America, this behavior is non-existent.
Right.
Like we're so used to the punishment, so if I'm not good at something, I'm kind of just not going to say anything and hope that, I don't have to do it or it doesn't come up. Yeah. Oh yeah, that thing. But I mean, how critical is that for a meaningful engagement with someone? Is like, you know what, listen, when it comes to that job, I'm just terrible at it. And right away, the person knows like, okay, so either I'm going to give it to them, I'm going to have a different expectation on the result, or I'm going to know I'm going to have to work through it a little bit more or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow.
But here's the thing that happens is, so it's risky to be vulnerable. because I don't know how you're going to use that information against me. So that's why I don't do it. It's too much of a risk. So what we had to figure out is how do you create an environment where you can start to build that. But what we find is, and you probably had this experience, when you do share that, people are like, they want to help. They want to jump in. They're like, I got you, man. Right? And so, wow. So now people are like, hey, I got you. So show your cards and you give people the chance to step up. Is that going to happen 100% of the time? No, it's not. Are people going to use the information against you sometimes? That's a risk, sure. But I can tell you the net is going to be more positive than those few instances where someone does say, I know how to zing you later, right? You're going to have more positives than you're going to have the negatives. The second behavior was to speak with candor. And this is a tricky one because people say, candid, oh, you want me to be candid? I'll be candid.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what's on my mind.
Nice hairpiece.
Right? And that's not what it's about. If you've read any of Kim Scott's stuff, the Radical Candor, she kind of, I like the way she balances it out. It's, speaking directly with a level of care. You can't speak more directly than you are caring for that person.
Ooh.
And so you have to care more about that person than you're speaking directly. So it's got to be balanced. And so, so one of the questions that I ask is, okay, does this thing that I'm thinking really need to be said? Do I need to say it? Do I need to say it now? And so I evaluate those things and, okay, if it doesn't actually need to be said because it's not really going to move things forward, it's not going to, okay, then maybe I shouldn't be candid. Do I need to say it? Am I the person who should be saying it, or is it someone else that should be saying it? And does that person need to hear it? And so those are the things that we kind of consider, we kind of evaluate in that part of the process. But it's really about, the reason you're even asking those questions is because you're trying to say, hey, I care about this person, and so do I lay this on them?
Right.
And yeah, I need to lay this on them because I do care about that person, and I do care about where they're going, what they're going to say. I don't want them to look foolish. I don't want them to make that mistake. And so, okay, yeah, so I do need to say it. But it doesn't end there. Like, okay, when do I say it? How do I say it? What words do I use? When do I say it? So all those are considerations that go into speaking with candor. So it sounds very simple. Just speak with candor, right? But there's a lot of considerations that go into that. And yeah, and like
Dale Carnegie has.
yeah, lots of people, right? And then the third behavior that we came to that kind of wraps up partner for mutual benefit, and it's kind of where we're always trying to get to, especially with lean, get on the same page. If we get on the same page, well, now we can move things forward, right? But getting on the same page, we often think, well, okay, get on the same page. Here's the idea, here's the solution. And you're like, well, no, I think this is the solution. And so, okay, now we're in this debate. That's not getting on the same page. That's just who's going to win that debate.
Right. And I'm going to be committed to my idea and you're committed to your idea.
Right.
So basically, which one of us is the boss?
Right. And who's got more clout, who's got more influence, who's got the better idea maybe even. And so one of the things that we try to teach in this is don't start with debate, start with dialogue. Let's put the conversation on the table and let's talk about what is it that we know, what is it that we're challenged by. Don't jump right to the solution or don't propose the solution right up front because you get yourself into that debate position. Let's have a conversation about it first. And here's the reason is because if you start with debate, your brain just has a hard time switching to dialogue. And you can't do it. You're emotionally committed, you're mentally committed. Whereas if you start with dialogue, yeah, you may have to migrate to debate because you're running out of time and we need a decision. But now you've had the dialogue and you've gotten the information on the table.
Like I'm just picturing a conversation going down, we need to build something. We got this job, it just came in, we need to build it. And I think we should build it utilizing single piece flow. And you think we should do batches of 10.
Yeah.
And you start off with, my idea is let's build them in batches of 10 because there's 100 and there'll be 10 batches.
Yeah.
And I say, but single piece flow is faster.
Yeah.
We're arguing.
Yeah.
Versus
right at the outset.
Yeah. Versus where you say, what do we know to be true?
Exactly.
Okay, we know to be true. Well, we know a tried and true manufacturing principle is single piece flow.
Yeah.
That gives you the opportunity to say, we also know that sometimes single piece flow is detrimental to a process based on other constraints in the system.
Yeah.
Dialogue.
Yeah.
And then that makes me, before I committed to telling you single piece flows the way, I get to think about it again and go, oh yeah, the CNC machine does batches of 10. He's right.
Yeah.
Without looking like an ass.
Or, hey, by the way, that setup is 4 hours and we're only going to do 10 at a time. So, do I do one and then do something else and then do one? And so you want to get that information out. So, but you do that because we're going to have a dialogue about it. Hey, what do we know? And even what don't we know?
Right.
Right. And let's have a conversation. And also, so part of that is getting on the same, okay, well, who else should we bring into the conversation? And so now you're backtracking into all those behaviors. Okay, you want to get on the same page. Well, to get on the same page, we've got to be candid about, what we think and what we know and even each other's ideas. Well, to be candid, we've got to have kind of some level of trust with each other, and we do that by showing our cards. And we can show our cards because I know you appreciate me because you've been spotlighting me, and you're spotlighting me because you appreciate and value the contributions that I make
as an individual.
And you're doing that because you're prioritizing both of our well-beings. And you can prioritize both of our well-beings because you're trying to support me in the challenges that you know that I have because you've understood what they are because you've checked yourself.
If we had a mic, we would just drop it and walk out the door. I don't know where you came from or how you came into my life, but I can tell you with the utmost amount of certainty, we're not done with each other for a long time. This is just, my jaw's hanging down because how many problems I see, whether I'm working with clients, whether it's at my own factories, where if we followed those steps,
yeah,
how much further ahead could we be? How many fewer arguments could we have? How much better would people get along?
Yeah.
The only thing I'm thinking is like, how am I going to learn all of that? Like,
well, I solved that problem too.
Okay, well, why am I talking?
So one of the things that I looked at, okay, I got this great model, and that's all it is right now. It's just a model, right? So I said, okay, well, what is this model? Well, it turns out the model, if you were to apply that in an organization, you're really changing the culture. Fundamentally, you're going to have to change the culture.
Big time.
So then I said, okay, well, let's look at culture change. What does culture change look like? Well, how do we change culture? Well, we take the senior leaders of the organization, go offsite, do a 2, 3, 4, 5-day retreat. It's a lecture style retreat. And, and what am I going to remember? 5, 10% of that lecture?
Maybe.
And then what I've got to do is go back to my business, internalize what I've learned, model the behaviors, and then cascade that into the rest of the organization. So then I get my next tier of managers. I give them the 5% that I remember. So they're getting 5% of 5%.
Yeah.
They've got to internalize it, model those behaviors, and then cascade it down to the next tier. So now by the time you got into the front lines,
what'd you learn?
Yeah, what'd you learn?
Nothing.
And we that's how you do culture change. And by and large, that's kind of more or less how we tackle it. Because we're like, well, we got to get the senior leaders on board first, right? Like they've got to lead the change. Okay, well, there's maybe some merit to that, but that's just ineffective. That's not a way to do it. That's ineffective. That doesn't work. And so I said, okay, well, that's an easy problem to solve, right? So had to think about how to solve that problem.
I guess.
So what we ended up coming up with is we started thinking about just how we learn. And, so you have lecture style, you're going to remember 5%, 10% maybe. If you read stuff, maybe you add maybe another 5 or 10%. Yeah. Audio visual, maybe an e-learning, a video or something, you watch that. Okay, you're going to increase your knowledge acquisition. If I role play it, I'm going to remember a little bit more. If I have peer group discussions about what I learned, because you might say, oh yeah, when we talked about this, I remembered this, and I'm going to be like, oh, I didn't pick that up. That's a great point. So peer discussions, peer learning. If I then embed some kind of practice into it, I'm going to remember even more. But the ultimate is if I teach it.
I knew it.
Right?
Yes.
If I teach it, if you've ever taught anything, the moment you're getting ready to teach it, you realize how much you don't know.
Right. What if they ask me this? What if they ask me that? I better
Right.
go learn that.
Yeah, exactly. And
100%.
so what we did is we looked at all of that and we said, okay, well, what if we just did all of those things, embedded all of those things into a program? And so what we ended up creating was what we call the Respect for People roadmap. And it's an online learning platform. So as a participant, you log in. There are videos that you watch. So you watch the video, and that's a mini lesson. So it's a 5 to 15-minute mini lesson. And then over the series, you might watch a series of those. When you get to the end of that series, the whole cohort that you're part of comes together for that peer discussion. And we call them roadside reflections. So it's a Respect for People roadmap. So it's a roadmap theme. So everything is roadmap theme. So each module is a destination. Each micro lesson is a stop. And then those reflection moments that we have in between with the whole cohort, the peer learning, we call them roadside reflections. So we do these roadside reflections, and it's a chance for you to kind of reflect on what you've just learned, apply it to your situation, maybe do some role plays. One of the things that we learned as we were going through it, though, is people were kind of getting the education component of it, but we hadn't quite gotten it internalized yet. So then what we added is you watch the video, and now you answer a question, or 2 or 3 sometimes. The answer to those questions goes to what we call the travel guide, who is your mentor. And the mentor reads your answer and then responds to you.
Huh.
It's a one-on-one response. And what they're doing is they're looking and saying, okay, so they're going to acknowledge kind of what your experience was of that learning lesson. They then might challenge your thinking or challenge kind of how you're approaching it. And then they're going to try to engage with you further. And they're going to maybe offer a follow-up question. And all they're trying to do is just help you contextualize what you've just learned, but also internalize it. So you've gone from the education to internalizing it. And then the next lesson is a practice lesson. Oh, so you've just learned this. Okay, here's the tool, and here's how we want you to practice it. So go do this. So it's a learn, do kind of model.
Wow.
And so then you go do it, and now you follow this cycle. So for each of the 9 behaviors that I just laid out, you do that learn, do cycle. And then so for each destination or each principle, in between that, you have these peer experiences. And then on top of that, we will pair you up with your cohort members, and you'll do other exercises like role plays, where you'll do an exercise with that person. So if you want a group to really get intimately connected over the course of the 10 or 15 weeks that we do the course, you get to know your cohort members pretty intimately, pretty well. So if you've got a team that you want to get to know each other, this is a phenomenal way to do that.
Wow.
And so the program, it's about 40 hours worth of content. It's 72 stops in the whole program. So it's intense. It's personally challenging in a lot of ways, because it's challenging your thinking, it's challenging your behaviors, and it's challenging you to show up in a different way. And the last destination, we call the last destination better. And the last destination is really the bridge, we think, to continuous improvement. It's what is it that you're going to focus on? Pick one of the 9. We know you can't do all 9. Pick one of the 9 that you're going to commit to over the next 90 days to improve and to teach someone else. And so at the end of the program, we pair you up with an accountability person that's in your cohort. You make your action plan. Over the next 90 days, you're meeting with your accountability buddy. You're getting better at that thing. And now, so we did that. And then the next thing was, okay, well, now how do we scale this? And so right from the get-go, we designed it so that it could be scalable across the organization. We wrote the content so that it was sophisticated enough for leaders, but accessible enough for the front lines. And so it's one program for every single person in the organization. Now imagine this experience. You take everybody in the organization through that experience.
Different place.
And so people say, well, it's a long time. It's 15 weeks. I'm going to be spending a couple hours a week for 15 weeks.
The rest of your life yammering on like a moron, pissing people off everywhere you go.
Well, so I ask people, I say, well, if I could change the culture of your organization in 1 week, would you do it? Well,
Yes.
Yeah. It's 1 week's worth of content that can transform an organization. And we're seeing in the organizations that we're working in, it is transforming culture. So.
Amazing, because this is the culture bit is the hard part. Like everybody I talk to, everywhere we go, it's like, what's the hardest part of lean to people?
Yeah.
And it's a fact. I
Yeah.
mean, we're stubborn.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you kind of like cracked a code there. Do you have any like small worksheets or anything? Like if I'm going to get 5,000 emails when this goes out, and I'm just going to say,
yeah, we've got a guide that I can share with you. There's a website, respectforpeopleroadmap.com, is a website that people can go to. I usually run a free webinar if people want to learn more about it. Almost every month. We have open enrollments if people want to, they're not sure they want to bring it into their organization, so they can participate in a kind of a mixed group open enrollment.
Right.
So we run those a couple times a year, and a lot of people will come in. So here's the other part of it. We designed it so that, yes, there's a facilitator coach behind the scenes, but we designed it so that I can teach you to be the facilitator coach. So if you wanted to bring it to your organization, you come through, you get certified, and now you're the one bringing it into your organization. So it's not like you have to bring me in to do it and deliver it to your people. In fact, I'd rather that you do it, because you're going to build those relationships. It's going to be more sustainable, and it's more internally managed, and that's a better model. Everyone's always looking for, well, how do we sustain that?
Yeah.
So we designed it so that it could be self-sustained.
And so what about the just the stubborn donkeys? Like, every company has one, per
or two
20 people or whatever, what do you find happens to them?
Yeah, so what happens often is, and this is part of the onboarding with an organization, we talk through this a little bit, because what often happens is they opt out.
Right.
And that's the first sign that you've got a donkey, is that they self-select out.
Amazing.
And so you don't even have to do much work. Like, if someone does not want to personally improve, and you are trying to create a culture of continuous improvement, well, that's your first red flag, right? We all need to improve. This, as much as I know this content, I screw it up all the time. You can ask my wife or my kids. Like,
yeah, of course.
They're always, we have this. One of the tools in the thing is to check your tabs. So, when you're making a judgment, we want you to ask 3 questions. Is it true what you're thinking? No, it's not true. Okay. Have you considered an alternative explanation? The A? No, I haven't thought about an alternative. Have I considered the big picture? The B? I haven't considered the big picture.
I just want to yell right now.
I know, right? So TAB, right? It's not true. I haven't considered an alternative. I haven't looked at the big picture. I need to suspend my judgment and move on to seek to understand. And so, it's not unusual. My wife will be, we could check our tabs on this.
That would be the new best saying at my house.
Well, but in the organizations that we're working with, it's not unusual for people to say. They've got a new lexicon now.
That's right.
And so
Totally.
When someone says that, no one takes offense. They're
right.
like, oh yeah,
hey,
we probably should check our tabs on this.
You don't have to tell someone you're getting upset. Say, hey, we should just check our tabs and.
Yeah. And everybody you see everybody kind of goes, oh, yeah, okay, maybe that's not it then.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that guy's lazy. Someone says, I think we should check our tabs on that. Okay. Well, maybe it's not that he's lazy. Maybe
true?
that it's
That's
right. And you can see the process is working, right? And so it's a quick, and that's the whole point of this is that's what I was looking for. I was looking for, what are the tools to practice respect for people? And so it's a tool that you can use to say, hey, let's get back on track, and to really practice respect for every individual.
Man, it's so good. I mean, you were telling me earlier that when we've got Toyota over in Japan, they're creating this Toyota production system built on the continuous improvement, respect for people pillars, and then we've got all the Americans coming over. Now, in our defense, I think that they came over here and stole just as much from Henry Ford as we did from them. But
I don't think they stole it. I think Henry Ford said, here it is.
Right.
And they in turn said, here it is. And so, I don't think there was any stealing. I think there was a mutual
I heard
sharing.
some stories when I was in Japan, and they're like taking pictures of like, they want to get pictures of like executives together, and they're like, can you just move a little to the left so they could get the machine in the background? Anyway, it's business. These things happen, right?
Yeah,
But the important part is that exchange of information is happening. But you were telling me, why don't you tell the story about?
Yeah, I found this article in this obscure book. I don't even remember the name of the book. And I'm reading through it, probably like you read hundreds of thousands of lean books. And so it's like I've gone through all the popular ones. Now I'm into the second tier ones.
Yeah.
This is like a third tier one, right? And in there was like a transcript of an interview with Taiichi Ono. And he said, I was proud to be Japanese. They wanted me to share what we were doing with the Americans, and I wanted us to be successful. I didn't want to give up our secret sauce. I didn't want to give up our competitive advantage. So we shared 5S, we shared Kanban, we shared standard work, all the continuous improvement stuff. And they were happy to take it and run with it and go home with it. What we didn't share is the whole system. We didn't share, because lean is a system. It's how continuous improvement and respect for people work together. It's not, you can't do continuous improvement without respect for people. And you can't really do respect for people without continuous improvement, right? The fact that you are learning about respect for people is continuous improvement. Right. So they integrate well together. And unfortunately, we've separated them. So we're doing half lean most of the time. We're not doing full lean, we're doing half lean. And so, I read that and it was like, how you read something and it just, everything makes sense all of a sudden. I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, they pointed and we went, and then just didn't question it. Oh, that's it. That's what he pointed at, so that's it. And I think later in life, he was more open to sharing. But, in those early days, he was like, hey, I worked hard.
My baby.
I don't want to give it up just yet. And it makes sense. And so, so when all these early books were written, they were all written from the continuous improvement perspective with very little consideration about
it's like one line. Respect for people.
Yeah, or it's it's a little bit. I mean, and to a lot of people's credit, it was. There's so much of it that is enveloped in just the Japanese culture, and so it's hard to detangle that, right? Mm-hmm. They were students of Confucianism, and one of the fundamental elements of Confucianism is that they believe that everybody is improvable and upgradable. And you can see how that's woven into the thinking, into the system that they created. Mm-hmm. And so we just didn't pick up on all that. We didn't peel back the onion enough to get those pieces of it. So.
Yeah, when you were saying, they said, whatever it was, this, but what does that really mean? When we're in Japan, that was one of the things that I picked up on to be probably one of the biggest lessons from that trip was they think at a different level than us. It's like surface level is us North Americans.
Yeah.
And they're 2,000 leagues under the sea with the same sentence.
Yeah.
And the example that we were talking about was they were setting up a plant, and I believe it was Mr. Amazawa was charged with building a plant somewhere, a whole plant. And Mr. Toyota, you would think the instruction manual on building a plant would be like this thick, and he said, I would like you to build a plant, and it needs to be clean and quiet. Done. And I remember him telling us, and he's like, I'm freaking out, like okay, but clean and quiet, and what does that mean? Like clean and quiet, like floor's clean, sound less, got it. But they're talking about quiet. Nobody's fighting, nobody's arguing, customers are happy, there's no defects, and like once they started kind of digging into that, I was just like, oh my God. And then so they give us like respect for people. Okay, we'll stop being mean to each other. Maybe I won't swear at you.
Yeah.
But then you are the first one I've bumped into that has peeled that onion far back enough to develop a system that we can follow.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Scott, I gotta tell you, I'm blown away. So I appreciate you taking the time here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem. I mean, Lynn's in the background over here. Best podcast ever, or?
Oh, I wasn't listening to the whole thing. But I was listening to parts of it. I heard you refer to something which I thought sounded a lot like Byron Katie's for when you're having a problem with someone. First thing you say, is it true? Do I absolutely know without a shadow of a doubt that was true? And then you go through it.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, does that ever change the perception of judgment and of the situation?
Yeah.
Every time we do a podcast, we're like, I think that was the best one yet. So we must be doing something right.
Yeah.
But this has just been fantastic, and I appreciate you. We will make sure that we have your information available for anyone who wants to connect with you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So thank you
All
very
right,
much
thanks, man.
for
Thanks for
taking
having
the
me.
time. All right,
Yeah,
Scott.
Thank you.
That's it for this podcast. We're at the Northeast Lean Conference doing podcasts live here in our booth, and we're having a blast doing it. So see if we can't get a few more before we're out of here. Take care, everybody.